Hey, it's Barry Molt, still trying to get your business unstuck. And we're finally in the second phase of recovery from the corona pandemic. And a lot of people have gotten their PPP, their Paycheck Protection Plan money, but now they're trying to figure out how do they spend it to make sure that it can be forgiven by the SBA. Here to help with those answers is Amy Friedrich, who's the president of U.S. Insurance Solutions with Principal Financial Group. Amy, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
So how are you and your family doing, and how are you sheltering in place during this time?
We're doing fine. I mean, luckily, let's hit the high points first. Everyone's healthy in my family. So that's the great news. We're here in Des Moines, Iowa, which our headquarters of Principal is in Des Moines, Iowa. And Iowa has been seeing a little bit of increasing activity, but generally not feeling the brunt of this like some of the other more urban areas are. So that's been a blessing for us. Probably the most notable thing for me at a personal level is I've got a high school senior. So I've got two girls. One is a senior this year and one's a freshman. And so she kind of gave up, she was headed towards a great orchestra trip for her spring break senior year to Italy, and that got canceled. And then prom got canceled, and then graduation got canceled. And so the thing we're dealing with here is a little bit of disappointment about a really, really different senior year for her, but she's being a trooper.
But here's the good news. When she's a grandparent, they'll be asking her, what was the great pandemic of 2020 really like, Grandma?
I keep trying to give her. Yeah, I keep trying to give her that perspective. I think when you're 18, it's kind of hard to appreciate the long picture. But again, she's being great, and we're all safe. So thanks for asking. How about you, Barry? You guys doing okay?
We're here, unfortunately, in one of the pandemic epicenters, which is Chicago. Now is not really the time to be in an urban city. That's why I think that a lot of folks in more rural areas are probably having a little easier time of it. But we know that small business owners, they're having a hard time of it. Depending how you count it, probably somewhere between 13 to 15% of the small business owners out there got a PPP loan. So now they're trying to figure out how do they make sure that it's forgiven and they don't have to pay the money back. Where do they start? Because the clock is ticking. Right now, the federal government says you got to use this money by June 30th, 2020, or you're going to owe it back to us.
Yeah, so couple things. One of the things we were really hearing right up until yesterday from small business owners is they had qualified for the dollars, the PPP dollars, but some of the dialogue that had happened in the last few weeks around the first round of funding and what does it mean to certify in good faith that you didn't have access to funds in other places, that you couldn't have found liquidity in other places, it was really weighing on the minds of business owners. And so there were a lot of people who had been qualified, given a yes in terms of the loan, and hadn't decided if they were going to return those funds. So I think originally they were saying like May 7th, you're going to have to return those funds. And then on May 5th, they said, wait a minute, there's enough confusion. We need to give you some additional guidance on that. That additional guidance, the good news is, came out yesterday. And basically what they're saying is there's going to be a safe harbor in place for those people who took a loan less than $2 million. And so I would say there was a lot of relief that's kind of turning into a little bit of celebration of we've got some clarity, we understand. And again, in that second wave, the average size of the loans, I think, was something like $73,000 or something like that. So there was nowhere near that $2 million mark. And so I think with that clarification yesterday, there's a whole bunch of people who said, I really am taking the funds and I really am, good news, bringing my employees back.
Yeah, I think there was really some gray area about, well, is my business really, Amy, down enough? It's pretty clear cut if I'm a restaurant or a bowling center, I'm closed, but I know I've seen some down, but is it really down enough? Now people can just self-certify, right?
Right, exactly. And so that sort of ease, and I actually think, honestly, this is what the legislators who created this intended all along.
Absolutely.
They didn't, and I've seen you've done some good coverage on this. They didn't want to have a bunch of paperwork. They weren't envisioning that you would have to keep incredible records. With all that being said, however, our advice has still been keep good records. make sure you understand and have the ability to prove what you have applied directly to your payroll costs. And for most small businesses, a ton of their costs is a payroll cost. So keeping good records, making sure, even though you won't necessarily even have to produce it potentially for certification, we still would say that's a good practice for you to have.
Let me ask you a question, Amy, because I think there's going to be some confusion. What came out from the SBA yesterday was that if they're going to self-certify people over 2 million, that they actually had the hardship to go along with qualifying for the loan. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the government in week 7, towards the end of June or early part of July, isn't going to come back and ask for documentation, no matter how large your loan is, right?
Correct. We think it's a good practice to have that documentation ready. And we think it's a good practice to make sure you're continuing to stay up on whatever guidelines. Now, I suspect if we kind of do what's intended on the whole spirit of this construction of the legislation, that we'll go back to not, really light requirements on what we have to have for actual documentation.
So what should the small business owners keep track of? They got to keep track of payroll. It's for people that they paid between the time that they got the loan and I guess until June 30th or 8 weeks. So that's kept in track in terms of like their 941, how much payroll taxes, right?
Correct.
And so that's one of them. That has to be 75%, right, of
Correct.
whatever it is. What things can qualify for the other 25%?
The other 25% is going to be, there's some things that can qualify. So when you look at, there's a little bit of gray area that we're still doing a little bit of clarification on, among something that's near and dear to my heart, which is benefits. So when you look at the insurance benefits that you're providing for those employees, I think the regulation has been pretty clear that medical benefits, but if you happen to have dental benefits, disability benefits, life benefits in place, I would keep good track of any dollars that you have put towards that, because my guess is when the smoke clears on this, those will end up being qualifying ones that can contribute towards meeting the qualifications of forgiveness as well.
Early on when I interviewed Senator Marco Rubio about this, the intention was to really forgive this, right? To really help the small business owners, not have a lot of paperwork. My understanding that interest can count certain types of utilities. And the question is, what's really a utility? Is Zoom a utility now?
Correct.
So hopefully, and I think the SBA will come out with more clarification as these things get put together. But then one of the questions a lot of small business owners have is, all right, so they have payrolls. What happens if the payrolls don't exactly match up to the dates? Like it's a little bit before May 1st or a little bit after June 30th. How's that going to work?
I think here's the answer I give a lot. Additional guidance will be very helpful. And I feel like I'm a politician, to some extent, giving an answer that's hoping for future clarification. But I do think that's true. Here's what I would tell you. I feel like the small business, the SBA authority, as well as Treasury, is trying to listen very hard to the feedback that they're getting. So I feel like they are taking these things and trying to listen, trying to understand. So my guess is in the next month, additional clarifications will be published and will be given about this. And my guess is also that if they're going to veer on one side of the continuum, it's going to be towards making a broad set of things applicable to try to increase forgiveness, because the clear intent, the clear bipartisan intent of this was to try to give small business owners the dollar they need to keep people employed and keep their shops open.
Yeah, I think that's really clear, because if you talk to the members of the U.S. Senate Small Business Entrepreneurship Committee, again, they want to be as flexible as possible. And I think one of the things that a lot of small business owners are struggling with now is they may be in parts of the country that haven't opened up yet. They're not ready to open. They're not going to get 8 weeks in between now and June 30th. Do they pay people? Do they hold on to the money? What guidance you have for folks who perhaps own a spa where they're not open yet, so they don't think they should pay people at this point?
Yeah, I have a great story, true real life story right here in Des Moines about a small business owner that I'm pretty familiar with who happens to be a spa owner. And when she qualified for the PPP loan, she ended up bringing all of her employees back. They actually couldn't see anyone right now, But what she's got them doing is she's got them linked into the volunteer community efforts going on. So she basically took her staff, said, what's important to you? How do you feel like we can help? Even if it's not helping our exact shop right now. And she's got them deployed out working on different food delivery programs, things that they're comfortable with. Kind of Principal has a great thing going on with the giving chain. It's part of their charitable foundation. They're providing support back into that. So she brought them back on, said, what are you passionate about? And she's basically paying them to do things they're passionate about.
I love that story. Now, I think that some small business owners aren't as generous as that, and they're hoping that the government extends the June 30th guideline or the deadline so they can actually open up their business and pay the people. But we haven't seen any indication of that yet.
Well, Barry, I would say I saw one glimmer yesterday, and I hesitate to even bring this up, but the Democratic House kind of led proposal that's, I think, being called the HEROES Act, and we're going to have to, I have to sort through. It's like health and economic recovery.
They all have great names, don't they? The
right,
CARES
exactly.
Act,
and I'm gonna not do a great job with the name, but the HEROES Act. And again, I think everyone understands this is just a starting point. But when I did a quick skim through the HEROES Act, I did start to see a couple of things that we've been talking about addressed on there. One of them was that extension from June 30th to the end of the year. And so whenever I see that, I don't count that as, you know, in the bank in terms of what's going to happen in terms of the law. But what it indicates to me is there are people hearing that concern is out there, and they're probably going to be able to build some ability to address that through the next round of legislation if that happens. So I see a glimmer of hope there.
Yeah, at least it's in play. One of the other parts of qualifying for loan forgiveness is the number of full-time employees or full-time equivalents you have. That's a secondary test besides the 75%, 25%. How does that work, Amy?
I'm not going to be the expert on how that exactly works, but I know there are going to be qualifying tests on that. It's going to base, so the biggest conversation point I hear around that is, questions around, does it have to be the exact employee match? And I think we've gotten clarification that they're pretty clear. It's an FTE, a full-time equivalent look. You don't have to bring the exact employees back. So there was originally some big concern about, wait a minute, someone came off, they either found something else, or frankly, they've made a decision that unemployment is a better decision for them right now for whatever series of reasons they have going on in their family. And so the concern was, do I have to bring that exact employee back? So I know that the FTE test that's been put out there has been pretty clear that you don't have to have that direct match. But if you had 12 or 14 before, they're going to run some requisite test against looking for, 8 or 9 against that population.
Yeah, they want to, again, this is an employment help, and they want to make sure that whatever your average was before, your average is pretty much the same now. It's not, and again, people are capped at $100,000 anyway. So,
right.
One of the questions I've seen is, well, if I've got this PP money, can I bring my family back to work for me? I mean, there's all sorts of crazy things as people game the system, but they have to understand this money was supposed to go towards employees and also to give you the ability to pay your landlord the rent when perhaps you were closed. And I hope that people are using it for the right reason.
And I will tell you, by and large, people understand that was the intent, and that is what they're trying to do. Now, what I will also tell you is that I think this people waiting to fully take advantage of this until they knew that they might have to pass some of those good faith tests to return the money. I actually have hope that the end of May and June might have a pretty interesting and positive picture from an unemployment status standpoint, so that we actually see more clearly than we've been able to see right now that some of those people are coming back. Because that's what I'm hearing, is that clarity is going to do the things that allow me to get people back. And so I'm hoping that starts showing up in the data as well.
And that's the $64 million question is, as the states start opening up, will people feel safe enough to go out and to raise the activity? We just don't know. It's too early to tell at this point.
It is too early to tell. I can tell you though, when we do a survey of the small business owners that we know the best, at least through Principal, they're very concerned about taking care of their employees. I mean,
Yeah.
these are run like, you know, extended families. And so they're even looking to us sometimes to say, you know, who are your suppliers for personal protective equipment? If you can get masks, where are you getting that from? What's the best design that you've seen of a homemade mask in this type of environment? And what I would say is I am finding some of the local economic authorities, so, you know, partnerships, tri-area partnerships around counties and things, they're putting together some pretty good materials on safety and back to work plans, because they're sensing there's kind of a gap going on. And so I'm seeing some really good information start to come from local partnerships, economic development partnerships, about getting people back to work. And safety's been a top priority.
And I have to tell you that I have so much faith in American ingenuity. We're going to figure it out. We're going to be incredibly creative to be able to serve our customers. So, and I'm excited about wearing a mask in Chicago. Of course, it's required now because, Amy, I think it's a new fashion accessory for 2020. I've got all sorts. I got some for black tie. I got some for cycling. I got some for casual wear.
My daughter actually had some service hours that she had to finish up before graduation, and she still wanted to finish those up. And so she was sewing some masks. So I tried on lots of different fashionable masks and given her lots of opinions about what works. So I now have, you know, masks with cats and masks with violins. And I wouldn't say they're my favorite, but it's definitely going to be an interesting fashion accessory.
So, May, I just wanted to talk a little about what Principal Financial Group is really doing this time with small businesses.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Principal works with all size businesses. So I don't want to act like the only people that this is kind of trying for are small businesses. We certainly work with, you know, mid-size and larger businesses that are facing their own series of challenges. But the fact is those larger businesses often have extensive HR staff. They often even have legal resources that are helping them determine. They have in-house CPAs and legal staff. And so what we've really been trying to do is take our internal expertise, our own people who are CPAs, who are lawyers, who are have access to medical information, and we've created some good landing materials that small business owners can use and kind of sort through. I'm in this industry. What kind of questions should I be asking? I'm this type of a small business. I have this type of an ownership structure. What are some things I should be doing? Where can I look for liquidity? Where are some places I should be going to get good information? And so Principal has really created, and that's at, you know, principal.com. I'll do the little, make sure people know how to get there. But they've created a landing page that the team that's been working on this has been, well, you referenced ingenuity. I'm seeing as much creativity as I've seen in 2 or 3 years in terms of putting against this. So there's some really interesting stuff. I will tell a little story, besides knowing things like business owners that are doing those interesting things with the spa, who's bringing back workers to do volunteer work. What we're also doing is we have a really healthy practice that's a dental practice. And so we work with a lot of dentists who are part of our network. And one of the things we announced last week is those dentists are really struggling to cover the costs of personal protective equipment. So they want to get back open. They want to start seeing patients, but they have to do it with a different set of regulations. And so we're going to be providing a per patient amount that we will just provide for them so that they can cover some of the dollars for personal protective equipment to get back to work.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah.
So the URL then is principal.com if they want more information on some of the resources available for small business.
Yep. And it's Principal ending with PAL.
Of course.
That's the only trick there. Yep.
Amy, thanks so much and stay safe.
Barry, thank you. Nice talking with you today.